themselves, but about this country and keeping every single one of us and our children safe from harm. And Director Patel, I would like to hear from you the facts about what the FBI. Patel, isn't it correct that since January 20th, 2025, the FBI has made over 25,000 immigration-related arrests, including 350 members of Tren de Aragua and 195 members of MS-13?
Those numbers are accurate. The Tren de Aragua numbers are up over 350% from the year before.
And during that same period, hasn't the FBI seized over 66,000 kilos of cocaine, 6,000 kilos of meth, and 1,500 kilos of fentanyl?
Not to be nitpicky, but it's 89,000 kilos of cocaine and 7,300 kilograms of meth.
And isn't it also true that the FBI Tampa Division's Panama Express Strike Force specifically seized nearly 67,000 kilos of cocaine valued at more than $1.6 billion from illicit maritime vessels?
One of our best operations out of the Port of Tampa, and I was down there in South Florida when Panex did their work.
Director Patel, since October 7th, 2023 Hamas attack, the FBI has been a co-leader of the Joint Task Force October 7th. Isn't it correct that this task force is actively working to bring justice for victims and to prevent terrorist infiltration at our borders?
Yes, ma'am.
Since January 20th, hasn't the FBI arrested 59 foreign intelligence operatives for spying or smuggling dangerous material into the United States?
Yes, we have, and that's on track to be more than 25% than ever before.
And the FBI has also been leading operations against major cyber threat actors, including those from Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. Isn't that right?
A 17% increase from year to date last year.
Director Patel, the FBI's Child Exploitation Task Force continue to investigate predators who target children online and across our communities. How significant is that threat today, and what results have you seen under your tenure in bringing these offenders to justice?
We have, under Operation Grayskull, dismantled dark web units that are operating online, not just
Escape the cares and worries of the day and soak up the beauty and tranquility of nature with new outdoor collections from Living Spaces.
And when you let us get on these platforms and expose them to the public and show them the harms of these predators on these online gaming systems and social media systems, and we need more help from Congress to allow us more authorities to do that work.
The FBI laboratory manages the Combined DNA Index System, or CODIS, which compares over 25 million DNA profiles and aids more than 125 investigations each day. Director Patel, why is this important to law enforcement nationwide?
All of law enforcement relies on our CGIS operation out of West Virginia. And what that does is allow 19,000 agencies to come in and say, hey, does this guy have a criminal history? Hey, is this an illegal firearm? Do we have a DNA hit like we did in these recent assassinations? That's what the FBI brings to bear, because local and state law enforcement agencies just don't have that capability, and we're doing it 24/7, 365. CGIS does not close for 1 minute.
In your testimony, you noted that the FBI has ongoing counterintelligence investigations into China, Iran, and Russia across all 55 field offices. Why is it essential to maintain that scope of coverage, and what success can you point to in disrupting nation-state actors?
Our biggest threats involving nation-state actors are the PRC, Russia, and China, and they are up 33%, 83%, and 60% respectively in arrest alone this year. Those nation-state actors wish to do harm in our infrastructure, our critical infrastructure system, our energy, our water supply, and also go after and target individuals and senior citizens and take their money through online pig butchering schemes, which we've exposed in Cambodia by way of the CCP. This is groundbreaking work that the American public should be seeing that their FBI is doing, and I'm happy to have the opportunity to report on it.
Thank you, Director Patel. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The gentlelady from
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple.
unanimous consent.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. In response to Mr. Patel's making the remarks that, that maybe our colleagues are disparaging the men and women of the FBI, I'd like to enter the record 3 unanimous consent requests. One is entitled FBI is using polygraphs to test officials' loyalty. The second is Kash Patel knowingly broke law when firing top officials, lawsuit alleges, published by NBC. And the third is FBI forces out more leaders, including ex-director who fought Trump, demand for January 6 agents' names.
Without objection.
Thank you.
Gentlelady from Vermont's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Patel, thank you for being with us today. Appreciate your time. Let me say at the top, political violence should have no place in this country, and I strongly, unequivocally condemn the killing of Charlie Kirk last week. And this is exactly the kind of case that warrants a swift and thorough investigation by the FBI. What shouldn't be happening, however, is this administration's seeming attempt to exploit Mr. Kirk. Vice President Vance claimed that this is, quote, an extremely destructive movement of left-wing extremism, and said that, quote, it's part of the reason why Charlie was killed. He pledged to go after organizations on the left. But Director Patel, it was just 3 months ago that Melissa Hortman, the Minnesota House Speaker, and her husband Mark were shot to death in their home in the middle of the night by a self-identified right-wing extremist and Trump supporter. When that assassination happened, the FBI released a written statement denouncing the killings and pledging to hold the killer accountable. And I thank the Bureau for that. It was clear, concise, to the point. But when you compare that statement to the over 50 mentions of the Charlie Kirk killing and just 4 for the Hortmans on accounts affiliated with the FBI and your personal account, it appears to many Americans that you're valuing some lives more than others, and that's painful. And this is what I'm hearing from my constituents, so I just want to convey that to you. And the Vice President didn't even call on right-wing organizations to tone down their rhetoric after that horrific killing in Minnesota, and he never once spoke about dismantling conservative institutions. This week, when the president was asked by a reporter about Speaker Hortman, he claimed he didn't even know who she was. One of the most high-profile assassinations of an elected official in recent memory, and the president claims to know nothing about it, hasn't even heard of it. It was absolutely devastating for her colleagues and for her family. And I think we all can agree in this room that we have to stop this political violence. So my first question to you is, Director Patel, what is your plan as director of the FBI to turn down the temperature, especially in light of the fact that it seems like members of the administration are reacting to political violence based on party affiliation? What's your plan?
I can only speak for myself and the
Of course.
FBI. And what we are doing is, I think I mentioned earlier, we're following the money, because whatever attack you are describing, and they are all despicable, equally so, people need money to operate. People need money to conduct these attacks, to conduct these investigations. And so what we are doing is finding the people that supported this infrastructure system, because even when you say there's a lone, quote unquote, lone wolf actor, he's not truly a lone wolf actor. Something happened along the way.
I agree. And so can I just because we have such little time, are you making a commitment right now to follow where the evidence goes in investing? She cited, it's 5 times the number that 5 times the number of far-left extremist incidents are perpetrated by far-right. And it's been reported, and she mentioned this, that as of September 12th, 2025, just 2 days after Charlie Kirk's killing, that the DOJ removed that report from the DOJ website. That's why Americans are concerned that there seems to be a separate system of justice, that if you are a Republican and you are attacked, you will get the full weight and authority of the FBI in this administration. But if you are somebody serving in the Minnesota State Legislature and you are assassinated in your home, that the response is different. And I think to ignore the threats from the right or try to do a both and when there are multiple instances when it's overwhelmingly coming from the right, this is a disservice, because Americans want to know that whoever they are, whatever their political affiliation, that the response is going to be the same, and it is going to be done with the same diligence. And I'm wondering if you will commit to me right now that you will be a voice right now standing up to those voices in the administration that are adding to the violent rhetoric right now. That's what I'm asking you. Will you commit to this?
Time of the gentlelady has expired. The gentleman can respond.
My voice will be through the investigations that the FBI conducts, and we will conduct them all lawfully and equally.
Can we expect in the future that your
expired.
tweets in related to one killing
Time, the
will
gentlelady's expired.
be the same
gentleman
level
from-
of concern?
The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, sir. Director Patel, thank you for being here today, and most importantly, thank you for restoring trust and faith in the FBI, which has been severely eroded under the Biden administration. Thank you for your service and your continued service in this capacity. On April 7th, 2025, Charlie posted on X, "Assassination culture is spreading from the left. 48% of liberals say it would be at least somewhat justified to murder Elon Musk. 55% say the same about Donald Trump. In California, activists are naming ballot measures after Luigi Mangione. The left is being whipped into a violent..."
Grip, stability, precision. That's the essence of driving. Lawful.
Violent response, end quote. And unfortunately for Charlie, that reaction also came when they couldn't win a debate on a college campus. You cannot be intellectually honest and say that this problem is on both sides. It's not just what happened to President Trump, it's also what just happened to Charlie. We've gotten to a point in America where violence is encouraged. We have a former president of the United States that opens up his campaign in 2019, that's Joe Biden, by saying that his opponent is a, quote, existential threat to this country. Houston, we have a problem. People that you disagree with are not existential threats. They are not Nazis. They are not fascist. They are not racist. They are not deplorable. They are not irredeemable. They are your fellow Americans who have a different perspective on how government should run and what government should look like. Whether or not we should have strong sovereign borders, whether or not we should have safe communities, whether or not we should have places to worship our God and not worry about being shot, whether or not we live in communities and cities that are not overwhelmed by drugs and crime, whether or not we have two genders, and whether or not we have common sense in our policies and our values. And people that believe these things are not existential threats. I happen to be one of these people that believes all of the above, and as someone that served this country in combat, I can assure you I am not an existential threat to this country because I swore to protect her. Also want to point out, how many cities have you seen burned to the ground since Charlie Kirk's death? Not dead because of what he said. He is dead because people listened. My time is limited, so I have a few questions for you, sir. And again, thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate your time and your service. In your experience in the FBI, have you noticed a precipitous rise in political violence and other associated crimes that you have been investigating so far this year? And if so, is this trend in motive left-wing or right-wing violence?
I can always speak generally, sir. There's too much political violence, and it has been a precipitate rise on too many fronts.
How do we solve this?
We solve this by giving the FBI more authorities to go into and work with the private sector. There are too many online platforms. There are too many social media platforms. There are too many gaming platforms. There are too many places for people from America and around the world to get together without their parents knowing anything about it, without their school teachers knowing anything about it, and infesting the minds of our children and infecting them with radical ideology. And with that is the root cause of these problems, and we must tackle it. It is not a 1950s America anymore. In 2025, the cyberspace needs to be tackled.
Thank you. Switching gears, when your predecessor sat right there in that seat a couple of years, last year in a committee hearing, I asked him a very detailed question about Matthew Thomas Crooks, the shooter responsible for the assassination attempt on President Trump's life. I didn't get an answer from Chris Wray that day, and I submitted written questions to the FBI and into the record of this committee, and I want to resubmit those questions today because I think we are still awaiting answers to those questions. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to submit some for the record, please. I'd like to ask you, sir, and the FBI, under your leadership, would you please respond to these questions, and can you commit to doing that?
As soon as the trial's over.
Thank you very much. I will end with this. Charlie Kirk is not dead because of what he said. Charlie Kirk is dead because people listened. He set up a tent that said, "Prove me wrong," and exercised his First Amendment right. That's all he did. And we will continue to do so in this country in order to preserve this constitutional republic. And with that, I yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I begin, I want to caution my colleagues on, one-sided violence in this country. We just heard that there were no riots on the right. We're literally sitting in the building where there was a giant riot by supporters of the president, the right. We also heard that only leftists, have said that Trump is a Nazi. In 2016, the current vice president of the United States said, Trump is either a cynical asshole or he's America's Hitler. And so this is the problem. I don't want to have to say this garbage, but you want me to sit here and get painted with one brush, the whole left. No, there are extremes on the left, and there are extremes on the right. And we collectively should tackle that. But to come here and just look at us and say we all support what's going on in the extremes is why we can't solve anything in this building. Director, let me say first, thank you for being here, and my condolences on the loss of your friend. And I'm happy to hear that you want to do more on the social media platforms. It's crazy what's going on the social media platforms. There are so many conspiracy theories on what's going on with Charlie Kirk. Israel assassinated him, right? There are conspiracy theories about your personal social life all day. It is totally rampant. Big names on the right, Candace Owens, right? Talking about how what's been released as far as the dialogue between the perpetrator and his roommate is manufactured by the FBI, manufactured by the administration. It is totally rampant, allowing foreign governments to just perpetrate these platforms, all of these bots, all of the time to weaponize Americans. You see what's going on here? This is a byproduct of all of that. What's going on in the streets is a byproduct of all of that. What's happening is you see people celebrate Luigi Mangione is a byproduct of all of that. And so if we want to do something, then we should talk about Section 230. We should talk about how we're going to make sure that we don't let foreign governments poison our children's mind. And so I will work with you on that, Director.
I'll work with you on 230 any day.
No problem. So now, that was the good part. I want to take your attention back a second, okay? Breaking news. Kash Patel is nominated to be the FBI director. Dan Bongino is nominated to be the number 2 at the FBI. MAGA celebrates, rejoices, bells are ringing out. The team, Patel, Bongino, that sought out every podcast microphone to talk about the Epstein list. The names are finally going to get released. It begins. They produce white binders. Phase 1 with the podcasters. This is not actually one of them, of course, I made this. Your name's on it, right? And the names are going to come out. Pam Bondi says the list is on her desk. Then a memo comes out all of a sudden and says, there's no list. Oh no, no phase 2. Phase 2 binders never happen. You said the conspiracy theories around Epstein just aren't true. They never have been. And yesterday, in an answer to Senator Kennedy, you said the FBI is not in possession of any credible evidence that Epstein trafficked girls to anyone but himself. So according to your testimony yesterday and in this committee, according to the evidence the FBI has, the number of names on the list are 0.
No,
zero.
The index has been released, and the number of people involved in that trafficking operation were charged in 2018.
Other than Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, your testimony in the Senate and here is that according to the evidence you have, the number of other names is 0.
That were charged based on credible.
Attention homeowners, I want to buy your house right now, as is, no matter what condition it's in. And not only do I want to buy your house, but I want to buy it from you directly and help you move forward on the timeline that works best for you. On top of that, we keep the process simple from start to finish. There's no listing, no repairs, and no open houses.
It's a signature. That's the basis.
Sure, I'll do it.
Okay, I look forward to that investigation. Am I over? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your diligence.
Gentleman's time has expired. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from California.
Director Patel, as you know, my state, California, is home to the worst public infrastructure failure in U.S. history, known as California High-Speed Rail, although the name is probably a misnomer. Earlier this year, I joined your counterpart at the Department of Transportation, Sean Duffy, doing a compliance review of the federal money the state has received, and the outcome was that the state has not complied with the terms of its billions of dollars in funding because it hasn't actually built anything. And so that federal funding has now been cut off, but a lot of us in California still have questions as to where all the money went. We're 17 years in to this project, and absolutely nothing has been built. Not a single bit of track has been laid. There are no stations. There are no passengers. And the plan initially was to have the whole thing, LA to San Francisco, done by 2020 at a cost of $33 billion. Yet here we are in 2025, nothing has been built. And according to the New York Times, the project won't even be completed this century, and the total cost is now estimated to be over $130 billion. So I just wanted to ask you, do you think this is something that bears scrutiny, or can you confirm whether there's any kind of investigation going on at the FBI?
The FBI certainly can't investigate incompetence, but the FBI certainly can investigate and does investigate waste, fraud, and abuse. And so if we have any information that indicates that that happened in this situation or anything else, we'll look at it.
Thank you very much. We've also, been talking some today about the issues that occurred at the border during the Biden administration. And you might not agree with your predecessor on everything, but you probably would agree with some of the statements he made in testimony before this and other committees, raising alarms about the risk of terrorism from illegal border crossings. Since becoming director, have you gotten some insight into how well calibrated those warnings were, and what is the status of that risk now?
Since becoming director, there's been a sharp decrease of border crossings for known or suspected terrorists from the southern border. But unfortunately, there has been a sharp increase of known or suspected terrorists entering through our northern border. And so what I'm trying to do is work with our northern border states and our interagency to tackle that problem. But it is an absolutely massive border that can't physically be sealed. So we're going to have to get creative and put more resources into that.
And in a similar vein, there were over 500,000 unaccompanied children that crossed the southern border during the Biden administration. As we know, many were trafficked either through forced labor or sex trafficking. Do you have any insight as to what the scale of that problem was, and how have things changed over the last several months?
Other than what you outlined in terms of how it was described, I don't have any additional details. In terms of how many people are being trafficked into this country, especially unaccompanied missing children, that number has drastically reduced because the coyotes that smuggle these children for their criminal activity are the same ones that smuggle in narcotics, or the same one that traffic older age women. They're all interconnected, and because of the sealing of the southern border by this administration, that has come to a near halt.
That is a very important point, that we have seen far fewer victims of human trafficking because we finally prioritized border security. And by the way, you have children who are getting rescued because of the immigration enforcement activities that unfortunately some politicians in my state are trying to stop, thereby stopping those kids from getting rescued. We've seen, of course, a substantial reduction in crime here in Washington, D.C. since the FBI and the National Guard got involved. I'm kind of asking you to state the obvious here, but what is the mechanism there? Why have we seen a reduction of crime when D.C. has had such a huge crime problem for years, and then almost overnight we see such a big difference?
Because of the dedication and resources from President Trump's administration to utilize all federal, state, and local assets in a heavily crime-ridden area. I mean, if we did not have a crime-ridden area, then homicides, carjackings, and gun violence would not be dropping by 40, 50, 60%. And when you allow the police, the MPD, to work with federal authorities and allow the National Guard to set up your perimeter, this is what you can do in a few short weeks. And we at the FBI, under Operation Summer Heat, have set those Phase 01 operations in motion 4 months ago, quietly at the direction of President Trump. So we are scattered across cities across this country doing just that. But we're going to need more help to complete the job.
Yeah, in too many places in this country, crime has just been treated as sort of a norm, that this is the way things have to be. What's happened in D.C. shows that is not the case if we have the right policies and the right priorities. Finally, you know, this is tragically the second time in as many years that we've had an FBI director here following either an assassination or an assassination attempt. And so since there's been some time now since from the attempted assassination on President Trump at Butler, would you say that the public's understanding of what took place on that day is fairly consistent with all of the facts as you know them, or do you believe there's still material facts that have not been made public or are not fully understood by the public?
No, I think it's fairly consistent.
Thank you. I yield.
Gentleman yields back. The lady from Texas is recognized.
Man, oh man, there has been so much today, and I truly don't know where to start. So I'm just going to make sure that we start off with a few facts. So a couple of facts that we need to make clear for everyone is that, number one, Director Christopher Wray, when he was appointed to be the head of the FBI, was appointed by Donald Trump. Now, I will agree that I definitely take issue with a number of decisions that Donald Trump makes, especially when it comes to the people that he decides to appoint to very important positions, including this one, because I did have to make sure that I wasn't going crazy. But when I say that you are the least qualified FBI director in the history of the FBI, that is real, because you are the only one that never even served with the FBI prior to joining, yet we are supposed to believe that
That's
you are
false.
the greatest thing since sliced bread. I didn't ask you a question. Now, what I want to go
false.
through is to talk about why you are a failure and why, honestly, we just need to tell you bye-bye. I know that you got a little upset and you put on your show for your boss because it seems like you're trying to save your job when it came to talking to Senator Booker yesterday. But let's go through some of your failures. So before you were even confirmed, and I think one of my colleague from Georgia, pointed out that you were already targeting career officials so that you could direct illegal firings. Mind you, these cases that you were so upset about, which are the ones tied to Trump, the cases came through his handpicked FBI director. And frankly, when people sit around and say things like, oh, you know, we're happy because now we feel safe. I don't know who feels safe in this country except for the white supremacists, because I specifically as a black woman definitely don't feel safe. And frankly, my colleagues have been real nice to you today, and I applaud them, but I don't have the same demeanor because I know that multiple colleagues on this side of the aisle have faced death threats. In fact, somebody tried to kill one of my colleagues. And frankly, I don't know if this FBI or under your leadership, if those people would have been caught. I don't have any confidence in you. And if we start talking about the reasons that I lack confidence, we could start with you not just...
My work is easy because I use ClickUp. Here's how I keep track of all my tasks. I start by brain dumping everything I need to get done in a list view. Next, I set a priority and a due date to keep things on track. I create custom statuses to organize my progress exactly how I want it. I like to add the action items field so AI can show me the next steps. I had my teammates as watchers, so they're in the loop. ClickUp makes work easy, from personal projects to running a multi-billion-dollar company. Click the link below to create your workspace for free.
In addition, there was another one from another colleague who now is leaving Congress because they said that they were calling his wife anonymously and threatening her life to the extent that she ended up sleeping with a firearm.
Without objection.
Okay, so here's the deal. How are we supposed to have confidence when you're sitting up here telling the Senate yesterday that it will take you 14 years before you can get the FBI fully staffed to do their jobs? You're also now redirecting resources so that they can go and play ICE agents on the streets. You're getting rid of your most qualified people, and even when it came down to somebody that you consider to be a friend, you were posted up having some fancy dinner to the extent that you posted not only once erroneously, you posted twice erroneously as it relates to catching somebody, and then you want to go and say, let me take a victory lap. Because honestly, if it wasn't for parents deciding that they were going to turn in their child, it seems like y'all wouldn't have got there, even though he literally confessed online. So I'm confused about what it is that the FBI is doing except for trying to put on a show for the apprentice or whatever you want to call him. The day after all of this took place, there was domestic terrorism that was taking place at HBCUs. They were targeted. Yet I didn't hear anything from the FBI about what was going on. And again, black people kept saying, how did we end up in this? Because the numbers are so very clear that white supremacy is a problem. And honestly, I've not heard anything out of you today that makes me believe that you're gonna do anything about the white supremacy problem. The one that is leading to children being killed, children being shot, as well as members of their community as they're worshiping in their churches.
The time of the gentlelady has expired. If the gentleman would like to respond to any of that. Well, I mean, I'll respond. Kash Patel, as I said when I introduced him, public defender, former prosecutor, top staffer on the House Intelligence Committee, Deputy Director of National Intelligence with the National Security Council, Chief of Staff at the Department of Defense, and FBI Director. I think that's pretty good resume for the guy who's now running the top law enforcement agency in our country. And we've seen all the stats that he's given to the committee on how much better they're doing at getting the bad guys than the previous guy was doing. With that, I recognize the gentleman from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Patel, I think you're witnessing some auditions, clickbait auditions for the Academy Award for my Democratic colleagues. We'll see how they fare as they're on MSNBC later on today. But do you care, before I launch into my line of questioning, to respond to Ms. Crockett from Texas on that very elaborate and theatric display?
Here's what I've learned in my government service. I don't give a damn what they say about me as long as I'm succeeding in the mission. We're succeeding in the mission because the men and women of the FBI have never been empowered to do more work and to hit the streets harder than by President Trump's authorities and resources he's given us. And so all I care about is that we are capturing more child predators than ever before, taking more drugs off the streets than ever before, that we are capturing murderers at a significantly historic rate, and we're delivering this country the lowest murder rate in recorded history. That are facts that you cannot dispute. But you can come at me all you want. I don't care.
Thank you, Director, for that, and we appreciate your service. We appreciate the results speak for themselves, I think, pretty plainly, and your commitment not only to results, but to transparency, so we do appreciate that. Director, who was John Durham?
He was a former federal prosecutor, United States attorney, and ultimately appointed special counsel in the first Trump administration.
Correct, and what there was a document that he released in his findings called the Durham Report. What was the Durham Report briefly, and what were the findings very briefly?
It was every special counsel that's appointed produces a report to the Attorney General. Special counsel's Durham Report largely focused on Crossfire Hurricane and included extensive summary findings in classified and unclassified manner, and we released the classified version, finally declassifying it for the American public in this committee.
Correct, and you released that in July of this year.
I think so.
Yes, sir. Isn't it true that in the classified Durham Annex, as it's referred to, that in 2016 the Obama administration obtained intelligence information from a source contained in two separate memoranda, one in January of 2016 and one in March? The two memoranda described confidential conversations between DNC chair Debbie Wasserman Schultz and two individuals from the Soros Open Society Foundation. Isn't that true?
As written in the report, I'll let her speak for itself.
In the Durham Annex in January of 2016, the memorandum noted in part that President Barack Obama intended to scuttle the FBI's investigation into Hillary Clinton's private email server and mishandling of highly classified information during her time as Secretary of State. Isn't that found in the report?
I believe so.
Isn't it also found in the report that in March of 2016, the memorandum also included references to the same Obama effort to shut down the Clinton investigation, but additionally outlined a plan to falsely connect Trump to Russia? Isn't that in the Durham Annex?
I think it's in more than the Durham report, but yes.
The memo also stated in part that, quote, the Democrat Party's opposition is focused on discrediting Trump. Among other things, the Clinton staff, with the support from special services, is preparing scandalous revelations of business connections between Trump and the Russian mafia. Isn't that also found in the now unclassified Durham Annex?
I believe so, sir.
According to the Durham Annex, based on analysis and translation of the intelligence, FBI analysts believed that special services could either mean the FBI or CIA, or the Trump dossier author Christopher Steele. Isn't that in the Durham Annex?
I believe so, sir.
When the Obama administration received intelligence in March of 2018, Fusion GPS was preparing open source opposition research regarding purported ties between Trump and Russians. The research was paid by the Clintons' campaign and the DNC. Isn't that open source and also in the Durham Annex?
I believe both.
Okay. And so also in the Durham Annex, which I found interesting, was the potential campaign plan was shared with high-ranking career officials at DOJ. Isn't that in the Durham Annex?
I believe so, sir.
The Durham Annex describes that in July of 2016, emails allegedly between Leonard Bernardo, senior vice president of George Soros's Open Society Foundation, included data providing specificity on the Clinton plan in an attempt to smear Donald Trump by falsely linking him to Russia. Isn't that in the Durham report?
I believe so.
And so, briefly, this additional evidence that you've unclassified and released to the American public, what does that purport to show or augment about the Durham report that you can share with the American people?
Put simply, that the FBI was weaponized.
Against a political campaign.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The
I have UCs.
gentlelady from Texas recognized for unanimous consent.
Yes. First one is Russia's ghostwriter hacker group takes aim at German election. This is from Politico.
Objection.
The next one is Director of National Intelligence, 30 days until election 2024, which specifically states that our assessments about activities and goals of Russia, Iran, and China are unchanged from earlier.
You guys have to check this out. So you can basically enter a prompt like this and add a few details.
Objection.
The next one is Russian interference coming soon to an election near you. Russia pursues a systemic strategy of undermining elections and influencing public opinion in the West. EU and NATO countries must recognize that Moscow often acts through agents within their own borders and build resilience to such interference.
And what's the source?
This one is CarnegieEndowment.org.
Okay, without objection.
Thank you.
The gentlelady from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Director Patel, I'm glad that I'm going a little out of order here because I'm going to pursue some of the things that you were just talking to Mr. Fry about and remind you about your confirmation hearing. At your confirmation hearing in January, you said under oath, and I quote, "There will be no politicization at the FBI. There will be no retributive actions taken by the FBI should I be confirmed." And in your written response to the Senate questionnaire, you said, I quote, "Personnel decisions shall be based on performance and adherence to the law. And every FBI employee will be held to the absolute same standard, and no one will be terminated for case assignments." So I want to just go through a couple scenarios with you to get a sense of whether you think these are examples of politicization, performance, and adherence to the law. So, first question. Would hiring FBI agents, analysts, and supervisors from only one political party being politicization or making personnel decisions based on performance and adherence to the law?
We don't ask FBI people, applicants, where their political parties are.
Mr. Patel, do you ask FBI applicants who they voted for?
The FBI does not.
Are you aware that in the lawsuit that Mr. Driscoll filed against you and the FBI, he was asked who he voted for?
Since that lawsuit has been filed, that's ongoing litigation, I'm not able to comment.
Well, but it also means that you just said that what happened in his situation didn't happen. So we will go on to the next question. Let me ask you an even easier one. Does firing agents for working on the cases that they were assigned to and that the president didn't like, is that politicization of the FBI or making personnel decisions based on performance and adherence to the law?
The FBI doesn't terminate anyone based on case assignments alone.
Has the FBI ever been sued by somebody who felt that they were terminated based on case assignments?
In the entire history of the FBI, I'm sure they have.
No, since your tenure.
I'm sure there's ongoing litigation.
Yes. In fact, there is ongoing litigation. And in fact, people have been asked who they voted for. And in fact, you are running an FBI for the President of the United States rather than the people of the United States, because my questions were not hypotheticals. They are the things you have done during your tenure. And according to a lawsuit filed last week by long-term FBI agents, you fired former acting director Brian Driscoll. He had served with the Bureau for nearly 20 years, earned a Medal of Honor, Medal of Valor for bravery during the dangerous ISIS raid, and had a wealth of crisis response experience and led the FBI's critical incident response group. When the Trump administrations interviewed Mr. Driscoll for that role, they interrogated him about his political leanings and who he voted for in the last 5 elections. Questions Mr. Driscoll refused to answer because those types of questions impermissibly politicized the FBI. You also fired Steve Jensen, who served the FBI for nearly 2 decades and ran critical terrorism, counterintelligence, and organized crime operations, whom you once described as embodying what the American public demands of the FBI. But he was fired because he took part in investigating crimes committed on January 6th. And Trump's MAGA base lambasted you online for keeping him at the FBI. So he's no longer at the FBI. You also fired a decorated combat veteran with decades of experience in the Bureau, Special Agent Walter Jardia, because he worked on the investigation into the Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election and helped investigate Trump's ally, Peter Navarro. Director Patel, it is very clear that you have flunked your own test. You've put saving your job, which I actually believe you were being honest about during your confirmation hearings, over doing what's right for the FBI and the American people. That is not adherence to the law. Thank you, and I yield back.
Time of the gentlelady is expired. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Patel, it's great to have this opportunity. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your service. And I've got to say, one of the most disheartening components of the previous administration, when I was working with local law enforcement all over the state of North Carolina, all over the country, people rightfully did not really care about the inner workings of Washington, D.C. The FBI had previously been the paramount, the sterling, the top of the top law enforcement agency. They wanted their FBI to fight crime. Whatever small town, city, whatever it may be, FBI was expected to deliver for the American people. And then reports started to come out, in addition to the likes of McCabe, Comey, Clapper, Strzok, Page, that the FBI was targeting Christian nonprofits. They were targeting parents for protesting radical gender theory at their schools. They targeted Catholics, churches, pro-life organizations. And the FBI was really bruised in just modern day America. And your focus on getting the FBI back to the streets, fighting criminals, locking up bad guys, whether they're violent criminals, whether they're sex predators, whatever they may be, that is restoring the reputation of the FBI, and I thank you for that. In regards to the perceptions, I want to be very clear here. You mentioned the statistics about removing dangerous illegals, removing thousands of kilograms of drugs, violent criminals, guns. The border is secure. These accomplishments are noteworthy and they're needed. But at the same token, I want your take. The fight is not over. Isn't that correct? When we look at what happened in the previous administration, the number of illegal alien criminals that made their way into this country of every type, they're embedded, they're here, and it's going to take a sustained effort to win this battle.
That's the critical component, sustained effort. And that's the critical component when you look at what happened in Washington, D.C. We're not here for 4 seconds in terms of safeguarding Washington, D.C. Yep. It's a sustained initiative. We're taking it to Memphis and wherever we decide else. And so we are going to continue the mission till it's done.
In regards to offloading some of the agents from Washington, D.C. to the states, to the people, can you just explain how tactically that is a force multiplier in the law enforcement community around the country?
Yeah. It's pretty simple. You don't even have to be in law enforcement to know that. If you put cops with other cops, they're going to do cop work.
That's right.
And what was needed in the communities out there was more cops. What was not needed in the bloated bureaucracy of Washington.
There's just something special about Texas weekends. Something that makes us push a little harder, stand a little tall.
Through the last 4 years, the open border policies, whether it's terrorism, drug trafficking, human trafficking, violent crime, massive amounts of organized retail theft, and other types of criminal behavior. Can you describe, just so anyone who's listening here can talk about, how serious the levels of criminality have become in the United States?
Well, unfortunately, in order to have these record-breaking numbers of arrests and seizures, you tragically had to have a record-breaking explosion in violent crime, and it doesn't happen overnight. And it came in from all corners of the earth and from all platforms, including social media. And that's the root cause of all of these evils. And in order to clean it up, it's not going to happen overnight. But the men and women of the FBI, what they did in these 7 months, everybody should be talking about it. Every single district in this dais is safer now, today, than it has ever been because of that work.
And in regards to the ongoing political climate, Director Patel, how do sanctuary policies that are still being implemented and defended in certain states, cities, and counties, how do they help or hurt your efforts to make America safer?
Well, if you are harboring criminals, you are harboring our ability to keep our communities safe. It's that simple. If you have a fugitive warrant for a violent felony offense and we are not able to procure you because of policies or rules that don't allow us to go get them, and time again, we have heard all too many illegal immigrants who should not have been here, murdering women, murdering children, giving drugs to our youth, and raping our children, and that is unacceptable.
Straightly put, can you separate immigration enforcement with fighting crime?
They're intertwined.
Thank you. In regards to policies like cashless bail, how does that help or hurt your efforts?
criminals know that there are certain jurisdictions where if they shoot someone, they'll be out the door within the next hour to do it again. And that's an ethos that is, and a system that has been built out over years that we are combating.
How is defunding the police around the country, how has that helped or hurt?
As long as I'm in this seat, we're not defunding any cops.
Good. Thank you, Director. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Garcia is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Jordan, and welcome again, Director Patel. As members of the Judiciary Committee, we have a responsibility to conduct oversight of the FBI and assess whether or not you're doing a good job in a responsible and impartial manner, or whether you're just a henchman for Donald Trump who's weaponizing the Bureau at the expense of public safety. As Congressman for tenure, is the Bureau's expanded role in low-level, non-criminal immigration enforcement. I have a report here from the conservative Cato Institute. They've obtained ICE documents showing that over 2,500 FBI personnel are now working on immigration enforcement. A yes or no question. Did you sign off on this?
2,500 FBI employees are not currently working on immigration enforcement.
Did you sign off on this?
On the Cato report?
On the 2,500 personnel, FBI personnel that have been reported to now be working on immigration enforcement.
I couldn't have signed off on it because it's not happening.
You can call it whatever you want, but the reality is that over 2,000 personnel individuals are now working at ICE instead of their jobs. I want to follow up on something that Senator Durbin asked you about yesterday. This article from MSNBC reports that nearly every agent on Baltimore's domestic terrorism unit, who was, by the way, investigating the 764 network of child predators, was diverted to work on immigration enforcement full-time. That forced them to, and I quote him, walk away from investigations of a network of violent predators that targets and exploits children online. Yes or no? Were you aware that this happened, and did you sign off on it?
The premise is false. The 764 network in Baltimore is taken down, and FBI agents do double and triple duty all the time.
I'm reclaiming my time. You told Senator Durbin yesterday you didn't know about it, so your testimony is inconsistent today.
No, I found
Final
out.
question. Let me ask you, again, a yes or no question. Are you aware that agents have been told by supervisors not to documenting their shifting of resources toward immigration-related work?
That's a literal another falsehood. It's impossible to move a human being without documenting that work.
As FBI director, you must be transparent with Congress. You need to provide us information about how many agents have been diverted to non-criminal immigration enforcement, why the Baltimore unit was dismantled, and whether there's a cover-up of what's happening under your leadership, because this goes to the heart of whether or not you're carrying out the stated mission of the FBI, keeping our communities safe. Diverting FBI agents from investigating violent child predators doesn't make us safer. Using FBI resources to target parents, children, and other immigrants for low-level, non-criminal enforcement doesn't make us safer. Enabling violent, lawless conduct by federal enforcement doesn't make us safer, as we saw last week when an ICE officer killed one of my constituents. And I know that the FBI has been involved in that investigation. And yesterday, ICE did a raid in the suburb of Elgin where 2 U.S. citizens were arrested, and who accompanied them on that filming of that show? Secretary Nunn. Shameful conduct. And weaponizing the FBI to serve Donald Trump's political agenda instead of the American people does not make us safer. Before I yield back, Mr. Chairman, I request unanimous consent to submit the following documents for the record. A report from the Cato Institute, which I referenced earlier, where ICE has diverted over 2,500 officers from their jobs. And two, an article from MSNBC titled, Trump's Deportations Divert FBI Agents Off Child Predator Cases, and an article from CNN entitled, White House Pressure for Increased Immigration Arrests Strains Law Enforcement Agencies. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Without objection, the gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Wisconsin recognized.
Thank you, and thank you, by the way, for coming over here. Sorry you have to put up with all this. I know when you took over, the FBI's reputation in a lot of circles perhaps had never been lower. I mean, part of that is brazen involvement in political activity, the Foreign Influence Task Force, getting involved and trying to suppress news stories in the New York Post, Crossfire Hurricane coming up with bogus stories to try to flip the 2016 election, FBI downplaying the stories of Hillary Clinton's emails in the 2016 election. That's their overt involvement in political activity. I think a strong anti-religious bias. We talked about stories of an anti-Catholic bias in there. I know I've talked to people about horrific overreaction at the big Hindu temple in New Jersey, in which, just so people understand, you had a rectory in the temple area, the religious leaders, taken out at gunpoint, big problems. And I think finally the FBI trying.
Did you know there's an easier way to find and hire a lawyer? Introducing Nolo.com, the fastest way to connect with top-notch attorneys in your area. Here's how it works. Step 1, describe your case. Simply tell us about your case and provide your contact information. It's quick and easy. Step 2, get matched. We instantly list attorneys who are best suited to handle your case. No more endless searching. Step 3, hire the lawyer. Choose from the list of attorneys you'd like to work with. It's all about finding the perfect match for you. And the best part,
supervisors told them this is okay or even admirable. And what I'm going to ask you, are you able to do anything to make sure that in the future these corrupted FBI agents understand the importance of religion in our life, and they're not to view it with suspicion? They understand parental rights and the idea that traditionally in America, parents have the ability to object when their young 5 or 6-year-old children or year-old or very young children are getting what most people consider highly inappropriate sexual contact. What are we doing there to try to make sure we don't have problems with these FBI agents again, or make sure that in the future administrations, they would object if they are asked to behave in such a immoral fashion?
Two things. If you are corrupt, you don't work at the FBI. It's that simple. So we don't tolerate any form of corruption or any deviation from our high standards, whether you're an agent, an intel analyst, or whatnot. And just to show the American public the resurrection that the FBI has had in these last 7 months, you don't have to believe me. Our applicant pool has doubled month over month every year from the highest point it has ever been. More people want to work at this FBI than ever before in U.S. history.
I'm sure that's because of you, and you're kind of anticipating my next question. I talk to retired FBI agents in my area who sometimes retired in part because they hated the woke, anti-conservative culture at the FBI. And they are concerned, the retiring agents, about new agents, not on your watch, but before this, being corrupted in the universities before they were hired. And they are very worried about what will happen with the new agents. So I think you're answering my question. Do you feel you'll be able to a certain extent solve the problem of inappropriately woke agents filling up the agency in the past, because now you're going to have a larger pool to draw from?
Everybody that comes to work at the FBI is allowed to have their own belief system, but they're not allowed to bring that belief system into the workplace. And anyone that does won't work at the FBI.
Okay, very good. Now, recently, there's sort of another potential scandal, I guess, a politically motivated thing, Arctic frost. Do you want to comment on that? And it appears one more time as perhaps the FBI was getting involved in what would normally be considered political events.
We are not getting involved in political events, except this one.
Okay. And final thing, with regard to prejudice against Catholics, what happened in the big Hindu temple there in New Jersey? Do you think, have you ever, or has anybody ever apologized to the Catholic Church or apologized to that temple?
I don't know, sir.
Okay. Is that something you think would be perhaps a good idea to do in the future?
I think leadership should address it.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, time has expired. Gentleman yields back the, so we got the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Harris.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Director Patel, for your endurance and your perseverance throughout today's hearing and for all you've shared. First of all, let me start by saying that I was very grateful and glad to see that the FBI has joined the investigation of the tragic and brutal murder of Irina Zarutska in Charlotte, which is just right by my district. This woman, as you know, fled the war in Ukraine only to be killed in cold blood by a man who had no business being on the streets whatsoever. This man, who had been seen stabbing Irina to death on video, had been arrested 14 previous times, served prison time, and was diagnosed with a severe mental illness. In response to the previous offense, the magistrate over his case released him to roam the streets with a $0 bond and a simple written promise to appear in court. Mr. Patel, let me just ask, should judges apply the most lenient bail standards to people with extensive criminal history?
Do they apply the most lenient? I'm sorry.
Yeah, should they apply the most lenient bail standards to people with extensive criminal history?
That has not been my experience. That should not happen.
Is America a place where young women should fear to ride public transit?
No.
And was Irina Zarutska's death, would you say, possibly the result of Democrats' pro-crime policies?
That investigation and matter is in open trial, so I don't want to stylize the evidence.
I understand. Well, Mr. Patel, let me just say, taking over the FBI after the Biden administration's blatant weaponization of the agency is no easy feat, as we've recognized throughout this hearing today. For 4 years, we witnessed the Biden administration targeting regular Americans rather than violent criminals. For example, the Biden administration's FBI spent its time and resources going after churches and Christians. We know that the FBI used an undercover agent to collect information about a parishioner. We know that the FBI investigated and surveilled a Catholic priest. And all of this was in response to First Amendment protected activity. Mr. Patel, I want to ask you, should the FBI use its resources to spy on Catholics?
Never.
So what does it say about the culture of the Biden FBI that law enforcement resources were used to go after Catholics, and some FBI employees were comfortable with taking such actions?
Well, pursuant to my transparency initiative and working with Congress on oversight, those documents, that's it. Those documents are available for the American public to see and read and hold people accountable, and that's what I'm committed to.
And so have you been able to hold accountable those at the FBI who went after law-abiding Catholic church members?
If they did so improperly, yes.
Well, I've been a pastor for 36 years, and I've constantly stood up for life and stood up for family amidst a culture that's increasingly hostile to both of those things. And if the Biden administration targeted Catholics, could I have been targeted by the Ray FBI as well?
Well, I don't know, but I'm not going to target you.
Well, I know that President Trump respects religious liberty and that his administration is seeking to right the wrongs of the Biden administration. Securing our freedoms and protecting faith leaders and communities requires a multi-pronged approach. What would you say in just the last few moments, what is the FBI under your leadership doing to make sure that our religious liberty and religious leaders can rest comfortable this evening?
Zealously protecting our First Amendment rights, but zealously going after those that abuse that right that leads to criminal conduct. You will be investigated, you will be looked at, and referred to prosecution every single time the evidence warrants.
Thank you, sir. One final area. I do want to draw attention, Mr. Patel, to Waxhaw, North Carolina, a town in my district that just fell victim to a cyber attack on September 12th that interrupted emergency services. Waxhaw is working with state partners, and the FBI has been notified on this attack, and I certainly pray they're able to help out with the ongoing investigation. Could you just speak to what the FBI is doing to bolster our community's cybersecurity to defend against any future cyber attacks?
Well, in North Carolina, you're slated to get a plus up of 22 FBI employees, and they're already on the way. And that encompasses cyber, counter intel, counterterrorism, field agents, intel operatives. And what we're doing on a macro level on the counterintelligence and cyber front is going after the people that fund these operations on these online platforms and breaking their banks, because once we do that successfully across the board, they won't have the ability to attack us.
Well, thank you, Director Patel, and let me just add my comments to those of my colleagues that are very grateful for your leadership, grateful for your courage, your consistency, and for being willing to stand in the gap.
Escape the cares and worries of the day and soak up the beauty and tranquility of nature with new outdoor collections from Living Spaces. These designs blur the lines between inside and outside by blending luxurious comfort and
354 attacks on Catholic churches. In the first year following the leak, there were more than 100 attacks against pro-life pregnancy care centers, and the shadowy pro-abortion group Jane's Revenge claimed responsibility for 24 of these attacks. Meanwhile, the Biden FBI focused resources on attacking Catholics and peaceful pro-life protesters like Mark Houck and Paul Vaughn. Many of these attacks on Christians and conservatives were coordinated or praised by dark leftist cells who lurk on the online chat rooms of Reddit, Discord, and game sites. This is a war room for Antifa and violent transgender activists. There have been essentially no incidents of violence by Catholics, pro-lifers, or parents at school board meetings, but there have unfortunately been multiple shootings motivated by leftist and transgender ideology, including recent attacks in Nashville, Colorado Springs, Denver, and Aberdeen. Worse, the targeted violence reached a boiling point this past month. A few weeks ago, an anti-Christian transgender terrorist murdered 2 children and injured 17 in a shooting at a Catholic mass. And last week, while we were sitting in this committee room almost to the hour, Charlie Kirk was assassinated by a 22-year-old who appears to have been motivated by leftist and transgender ideology. As you confirmed yesterday to my Senate colleagues, he may not have acted alone, and you testified that in his online chat room of more than 20 trans ideologues that you were aware, I believe you said many more, many were aware of and possibly complicit in the assassination. Director Patel, in light of the increased violence emanating from the far left, is your FBI investigating this violent trend of anti-religious, Antifa, and transgender-driven violence?
All of it across the board is being zealously investigated, no matter what your motivation or bias is behind it.
Very good. We've also noticed a dramatic surge of the number of clinics offering so-called gender-affirming care. Whistleblowers in a recent NIH study confirmed that these clinics prey on some of the most mentally ill children and young adults in our society, and these clinics are quick to prescribe life-altering puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgery. And often these patients get worse rather than better. And unfortunately, some have become violent. Some have even committed mass shootings. And the partner of one of them assassinated Charlie Kirk. Director Patel, is the FBI looking into the role that these gender clinics may have in the recent attacks in making these mentally ill individuals violent?
We're looking at the entire spider web for any of these attacks, be it Denver or Charlie or where have you, and that's why our investigations are ongoing. We don't have a final product yet.
One of my Democrat colleagues, as an aside, mentioned, quote, the federal takeover of our cities. And I don't know whether my Democrat colleagues, for some reason, liked Washington, D.C. better when it was more dangerous and more violent, when there were more robberies and carjackings and murders and rapes. But What has the crime picture in Washington, D.C. looked like since the so-called federal takeover?
2,100 arrests, 37% decrease in violent crime, same time last year, 60% decrease in gun crimes, 74% decrease in carjackings, and 53% reduction in homicides in Washington, D.C. in the last month alone.
Very good. And I thank you so much for your testimony. I know it's been a long day, so I'll give you a little break and yield back the rest of my time.
Gentleman yield?
Yes, yes.
Director Patel, what's a 302?
It's a report, the number of the report, whenever an FBI agent goes out and interviews someone.
And are you familiar with the 302 where the FBI agent interviewed the whistleblower who's come forward and talked about the former chair of the Intel Committee here in the House pushing staff members to leak classified information? Well, I'll just read from it. Staffers were instructed to use, this is from the 302, interview this person. Staffers were instructed to use any sources that had developed within the United States intelligence community to gather information, which would then be made public through the media in order to compel public opinion. You familiar with that?
I am.
Yeah, and that's how they played the game, wasn't it? Leaking information, classified or otherwise, true or otherwise, to create this public opinion to compel action to undermine the president. Is that accurate?
I believe so.
Just one other point I would make from this. This witness also said in the 302 that the agent recorded that the witness provided the interviewing agents with copies of both his handwritten notes and an email. So he gave them the stuff he wrote, and at the actual time this was taking place. That's all in the 302, right?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from Missouri.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to submit for the record an article from The Hill, Massive Crime Drop in D.C., City Sees Zero Murder Week, dated August 25th, 2025. And I'd also like to submit for the record an article from the New York Times, dated April 18th, 2025. Man who set fire on Shapiro's mansion cited treatment of Palestinians, police say.
Yeah, thank you. Without objection.
I have
Gentlelady from
UC.
Texas and then Pennsylvania.
Thank you so much. My first UC is the FBIAA letter to Congress on summary terminations, where it states denying fundamental due process and summarily dismissing special agents will only make it harder to protect our nation. These actions distract agents from their work, foster fear that their assignments could cost them their careers either now or under the next administration, and increase the risk of criminal and national security threats by undermining unity and morale within the Bureau.
Without objection.
The next one is a CNN article. FBI agents are again pulled from their day jobs to address a Trump priority. It states, morale is the worst I've seen, said one law enforcement source. The Bureau is becoming unrecognizable. Lots of people are weighing really difficult decisions right now.
Without objection. Gentlelady from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd request unanimous consent to introduce into the record a September 16th, 2025 article in the New Republic entitled DOJ Quietly Deletes Study on Politics of Domestic Terrorists. The Justice Department has taken down a study that proves Republicans' entire narrative wrong about left-wing violence.
Without objection.
Thank you.
Gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Director, for being here. I think without question we can say that Donald Trump has been tougher on crime and tougher on international terrorism than any president in American history. I imagine that brings you a lot of satisfaction and pride as director of America's foremost law enforcement agency. Recently, President Trump conducted very strategic and important strikes on Iran's nuclear apparatus in that country. We also know that there are concerns of significant Iranian sleeper terrorist cells here in the U.S., perhaps exacerbated by the open border during the Biden administration. What can you tell Congress and the American people about what the FBI is doing to safeguard us from potential terrorist attack by Iranian cells?
So our counterterrorism division, which is fully stocked up, watches for reflections in the intelligence streams that our intelligence community collects and produces, and works hand in glove with our partners at the CIA and elsewhere to make sure that any threat
attack from various intelligence agencies globally. What can you tell us about the counterintelligence operations of the FBI as a core function?
This is why the CIA mission is so important to the FBI, because as you said, no one else can do it. No one else has the authorities to do it. And even if they did, they don't have the capabilities to do it. And the CIA mission has to be headquartered in Washington, but have far-reaching capabilities because we have to face against our adversaries in the DPRK, in Russia, China, Iran, and elsewhere. And in order to do that, we have to have dedicated intelligence professionals on those target sets. And since I become director, I've demanded not only a dismantling and disruption of networks, but a public display of how we're doing it so the world knows that our adversary is A, attacking us, and B, we're stopping them. And that's why you've seen these dramatic increases in counterintelligence arrest in the PRC by 33%, in Russia 83%, in Iran 60%. We are showing the world that they are trying to engage in espionage activities against us, and we are holding them accountable publicly.
And there's been increasing concern about the Maduro regime of Venezuela, both their potential support of terrorist activity, criminal drug networks, and potential espionage entities here within the U.S. What can you tell us about your activities regarding the Maduro regime of Venezuela?
Generally speaking, one of the largest transshipment points and shipment points for narcotics out of South America, Colombia, obviously, and also Venezuela, is being utilized heavily by the narco traffickers to send up cocaine, meth, and fentanyl, and excuse me, all the other illegal narcotics through the island chains in the Caribbean Ocean and ultimately for America. So there has to be more work done in the region to stop those navigable waterways from being traversed with drugs bound for America.
And finally, Mr. Director, what is the one thing that Congress could most do in terms of passing a law to best support the FBI in making America safer and more secure?
Get us more authorities to get online, to get onto social media companies, gaming platforms, have legal access, and also have private partnerships with the FBI of those companies and allow them to report into us on a daily basis. There is no human being or AI system on earth that can go out there and cover down on the threat in those theaters. And so we need the assistance, and we need more authorities, and we need the private sector to double down.
Well, thank you very much for all you're doing, all the men and women of the FBI are doing to keep us safe, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Got a UC request from the gentleman from Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an article titled, FBI Flooded with Record Number of New Agent Applications Kash Patel's First Month. The FBI saw 5,577 new agent applications in March and more than 10,000 since January.
Without objection. The gentleman from Kansas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Director, thank you for being here. I have listened carefully to all the discussion in this hearing. I've reached two top-line conclusions. First, I am glad I don't have your job. And second, I am glad you do. Thank you for being willing to step up and serve in this role. I'd like to plow a little bit of ground that we've not spent a lot of time on so far and explore. You mentioned, and I'm well aware of your strong commitment to partnering with state and local law enforcement authorities. Obviously, one of the missions is in the counter-drug space. Another is in the forensic laboratory space, where both you and a lot of local and state agencies cooperate in terms of evidence analysis. From the state side, programs such as the HIDA programs, very, very important in counter-drug, such as the Coverdell grants, very, very important in maintaining state laboratory capacities. Would I be correct in concluding that if we are able to maintain robust funding for those types of programs, including both Coverdell and HIDA, that would contribute to the safety of the United States and to your mission?
Absolutely.
Director, you have talked a little bit about some of the counter-drug work that you've been doing. One thing we haven't talked about yet, the President, in one of his first actions upon taking office back in January, designated a number of the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. That's not just a paper transaction. I believe the list has been expanded since those first actions. In terms of America's military engagement with the cartels abroad, in terms of our intelligence engagement with them abroad, that designation has had real meaning and has affected some of the thinking and approaches of our military and our intelligence community. Can you talk a bit about how that designation might be affecting or should be affecting the FBI's approach to dealing with the domestic activities of the cartels?
The simple way to analogize it is after 9/11 and the manhunt for the foreign terrorist organizations overseas in places like Afghanistan and Iraq, the FBI received certain authorities to go out there and dedicate a mission to go after them both lawfully and investigatorially and collect evidence and provide it to our agency partners. Once the foreign terrorist organization designation was labeled over to the Mexican drug cartels, we can now do that here. And in Mexico, and in Colombia, and in Venezuela, and anywhere else they are. And so that's the best analogy I have. What we're able to do is take our counterterrorism platform, traditionally used for global terrorist manhunting, and bring it into this hemisphere against a very real threat, which is the drug traffickers, and they are foreign terrorist organizations. So we just have so many more resources and authorities now directed at them.
So, for example, Director, in the regions, from the vantage point of local law enforcement, there are structures that have historically handled those partnerships separately. HIDA, for example, is an example on the drug trafficking side. The JTTFs are an example on the terrorism side. How is the thinking evolving in terms of on a regional basis, either merging or not merging those structures now that the targets in many ways are merged?
So the JTTFs are kind of our forward operating base across every single state in this country to take on that mission. And anytime you're labeled a foreign terrorist organization, you come right under the authorities of the JTTF, the task force officers, and the state and local level police work that gets done in those JTTFs. And the Homeland Security Task Force layer on top of that, I think 25 or 30 across the country, specifically working with DHS and Secretary Noem to go after the drug trafficking foreign terrorist organizations because they have unique capabilities and authorities dedicated to that mission. And so that's the beauty of the HSTFs.
Let me ask you an adjacent question, Director. I noticed in your written testimony, I don't think we've talked about it yet, you brought to our attention an expiring authority. It's in 6 U.S.C. 124N with respect to counter-UAS drones. You point out that authority expires in statute at the end of this month, and you impressed upon us your interest in seeing it extended in some manner. Can you talk a little bit about the FBI's role in counter-UAS work over American airspace? I represent a district that's going to host some of the FIFA World Cup activities coming up. We're obviously very interested in security, and there are limits on what our state and local authorities have the capacity to do or what our military has the capacity to do once the threat is domestic.
So it's critically important. Both the FBI and DHS have those capabilities. I'll speak to the FBI, of course, only. And you raised the World Cup, and that's exactly what we need it for. The Club World Cup, which just happened, was 32 games in at least a dozen different cities across the country, the largest sporting events consecutively in American history. And we used our counter-drone capabilities to not only inspect and secure stadium locations, but where fans were hovering and we call base camps. And thankfully, because of the success of the FBI and DHS, we had no significant security incidences. And flipping to the World Cup, which is going to be 3 times as large, and obviously the largest we've ever had, and blending into the LA Olympics in 28, our counter-UAS capabilities are going to be the ones that are able to...
Work today is broken. We're all working in too many disconnected apps, and it's killing team productivity. But for the first...
for them, so we have to have it.
And making sure the bad guys don't have the same.
Exactly.
Very good. I yield back and thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Director, you've been amazing. You've been here 4 hours and 41 minutes without a break. We appreciate that. I think we have one more member, a few UC requests, and then you can we'll let you go. But we appreciate that. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you again for taking the time, Director Patel, and for Chairman Jordan for holding this hearing. Thank you for depoliticizing the FBI and getting it back to its original mission as well. Director Patel, do you agree that we have a problem in the United States with politically motivated violence?
Absolutely.
And I very much agree. I think we can all agree that political violence is wrong, it's evil, regardless of which side it comes from, and that we can all adamantly and vehemently reject it, or we certainly should. But one of the things that we've noticed recently is that affinity and tolerance for political violence is not equally distributed on both sides of the aisle. In fact, right now, social media is filled with leftists who are cheering on the murder of an iconic conservative political figure, Charlie Kirk. And it's not just random people on Twitter doing this now. There's a YouGov poll released just a few days ago, which stated that 25% of those who identify as very liberal believe that political violence can sometimes be justified. That's far too many, is it not? It is.
One is far too many.
One is far too many. That's right. Only 3% of very conservatives said the same thing, and we can agree that 3% is far too many. But there's an astounding difference between 25% on the left accepting and tolerating political violence and 3% on the right. I would hope that our colleagues on the other side of the aisle would also recognize that there is a systemic problem on their side of the aisle with tolerance for violence against people with whom they politically disagree, that there is a cultural rot on their side of the aisle that needs to be addressed desperately. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
One of the more astounding aspects of this is that it's not just people. This comes from the very top, from their political leaders. Just a few days ago, a member of Congress of this body, Ilhan Omar, shared a video on her social media account about Charlie Kirk's murder, and I'll quote what it said. It said, "Charlie Kirk was Dr. Frankenstein, and his monster shot him through the neck." In other words, Charlie had it coming to him. The words that he said naturally led to his assassination. I mean, that is a reprehensible thing for a member of Congress to say, to suggest, to promote in any capacity. And there are people across this country who are losing their jobs for far less than this. And that, by the way, is a just response to acceptance and tolerance of political violence. It's amazing to me that the political left today, who were the originators and the cheerleaders of cancel culture, now have the backbone to attack conservatives for defending their assassinated friend. But there's a key difference here. Democrats want to silence conservatives for speaking obvious, self-evident ontological truths like that men aren't women and men can't get pregnant. That seems pretty basic. That seems like a basic truth that we should all be able to agree on. Republicans, by contrast, are recognizing that a constitutional republic depends on the free and open exchange of ideas that we can debate without violence, and that assassinating a political rival is evil, it's wrong, and it should not be glorified or promoted or justified in any way, including in the way that Congresswoman Ilhan Omar did. So Mr. Patel, thank you again for being here. I'd like to, with the remainder of my time, just get your opinion. Does the FBI recognize the rising threat of political violence in America, and what can you guys do to address it?
Yes, we do, and what we can do to address it, Congressman, is we need to get online partnerships with these companies in the public space, on these gaming sites, and on these social media sites. As I was saying earlier, there is no way to triage the amount of information generated on these sites by the FBI alone. And we need the public-private partnership. And there's another law that's expiring, I think, at the end of this month, which I believe we need renewed, that allows private sector companies to report into the FBI without liability for criminal investigatory purposes. And that's the kind of stuff we need to keep going.
Got it. Thank you, Director Patel. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Director, I want to thank you again for being here. While we're waiting for members to get back to record their vote, you don't need to stay around for the these kind of motions. We appreciate the service you're providing the country, appreciate your testimony today, and appreciate the fact that you did it 5 hours straight. That's amazing. So God bless you and keep up the good work. The witness is dismissed. The committee will come to order without objection. The chair is authorized to declare a recess at any time. We welcome everyone to today's hearing on oversight of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. This is the first occasion for the committee to get back together since the tragic death of Charlie Kirk. Charlie was a good man, a happy warrior who fought for principles and values I think make our country special, and certainly was a strong proponent of defending the First Amendment, something this committee cares deeply about. I said this over the weekend. I think Charlie lived that scripture verse, 2 Timothy 4:7, fight the good fight, finish the course, keep the faith. Charlie certainly lived that, and he did it with a smile on his face. And so the tragic killing happened a week ago while we were in markup here in the committee. And I know everyone, I know our witness was a friend of Charlie's, and I know many people in the dais were as well. So I know we're all praying for Charlie's family. And I would extend a moment to the ranking member if you wanted to say something.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for saying that. The whole country reacted with horror and shock to the brutal assassination of Charlie Kirk in cold blood. And there is never any warrant for political violence in America. And just as we all recoiled together at the shocking assassination of Melissa Hortman and others who died in that Minnesota attack, we all stand together categorically against political violence in America and determined to end these cycles of political violence that have traumatized the country.
Well said. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Kansas, Mr. Schmidt, to lead us all in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As is customary, we will begin with opening statements. 5 weeks ago, because of the work of Director Patel, we learned that the former chair of the House Intelligence Committee and current United States Senator leaked classified information. We learned this because a whistleblower came forward. Whistleblower with 23 years experience in the intelligence community, a Democrat staffer on the committee, said this: they were pressured to leak classified information, which sort of raises the obvious question. Why would the head of the Intelligence Committee, the chair of that committee, who's supposed to be guarding our secrets, why would he be encouraging the leaking of classified information? Whistleblower told us that answer as well. The leaked information was supposed to be used, the leaked information, false information, was going to be used to indict.
I used to say, if I hear AI one more time, I'm going to lose it. But Monday.com is super easy to use and no
Supposed to share. Again, don't take my word for it. The Inspector General told us this. In his report, he said, quote, James Comey violated FBI policy by disclosing classified information. And what was Comey's motive? Same as the senator from California: to sabotage and undermine President Trump's first term. And we know that Mr. Comey's not been shy about what his objective was. In fact, 4 months ago, he told us. Remember this? 8647, Jim Comey told us just 4 months ago. Now, how'd they do it? How did the former chair of the Intel community, the former FBI director, and others in our government attempt to undermine President Trump's first term? 7 weeks ago, because of the good work of the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, we learned from another whistleblower, a second whistleblower, that in the closing days of the Obama administration, the intelligence community assessment was changed. On December 5th, 2016, they had one assessment. That assessment said Russia did not impact the election vote count. There was a meeting at the White House on December 9th, 2016, where it was decided, no, we're not going to have that. We're going to come up with a new one. And the new one said Russia was trying to influence election and did influence election, which just wasn't accurate. And that new one is published on January 6, 2017. Let's just show you a few things that took place. I want to show you first this email from Admiral Rogers, the head of the NSA. You can see it was December 22nd. It says to Jim, John, and Jim Clapper, John Brennan, Jim Comey. And he says, I asked my team if they've had sufficient access to the underlying intelligence, sufficient time to review that intelligence. On both points, my team raised concern. Further states, my folks aren't fully comfortable. A few hours later, there's an email back to Admiral Rogers. This one is from Jim Clapper, and it says this: it is essential that we be on the same page and all of us are supportive of the report in the highest tradition of, that's our story and we're sticking to it. We may have to compromise on our normal modalities. This is one project that has to be a team sport. That's our story and we're sticking to it. Compromise on normal modalities, that's a fancy way of saying, that's the government speak for we're gonna have to change the rules. In fact, we're not gonna follow our own rules. And that's exactly what they did to get the objective they wanted, to undermine President Trump. Now, how did it specifically take place? The whistleblower said that the government officials ignored concerns about discredited information. And what was that discredited information? What was the discredited information that they didn't ignore the concerns about? What did they use, that discredited information? Of course, it was the dossier. The now famous Steele dossier that was paid for by the Clinton campaign when they hired the law firm Perkins Coie, who hired Fusion GPS, who hired the foreigner Christopher Steele, who wrote all this garbage and lies down. That is what was used to change the intelligence community report. And what happens next? What do Jim, John, and Jim do next? They go to Trump Tower on January 6, 2017 to brief then President-elect Trump about the dossier. Again, the Clinton-financed, foreign-authored dossier that the whistleblower knows is garbage and that they know is garbage. And then there's one final step. One final step. Jim Comey leaves that meeting with the president and immediately leaks to the press that they briefed the president on the discredited information. They briefed the president on the dossier and thereby giving it some credibility and creating the basis and the predicate for all they did to the president. They leaked false information, they leaked classified information, they used and leaked discredited information, and they didn't follow their own rules, all to sabotage President Trump's first term. And but for this guy, Kash Patel, but for this guy, we would never have known this information. The good people of this great country would not have known what took place 8 years ago when they were trying to undermine the guy elected by we the people. And I want to thank Attorney General Bondi. She set up a special strike force, a special team to look into this and see if there's any criminal liability that exists in what took place. Now, in addition to getting the truth to the people, Director Patel is getting the bad guys off the street. He's moved agents out of Washington, got the focus off of politics here in D.C., and is instead putting bad guys behind bars. 21,000 violent criminals have been taken off the streets, which is a 125% increase from the comparable period in the previous administration. He's rescued 4,000 kids. He's got 1,300 predators who he's arrested. He's also ended the weaponization of the FBI. No more spying on parents at school board meetings. No more pre-dawn raids on pro-life Catholics. No more retaliation against whistleblowers. And he's given us information that Chris Wray didn't. Maybe said better, he's given us information that Chris Wray wouldn't. Director Wray didn't tell us that there were 26 confidential human sources at the Capitol on January 6, 2021, even though he was repeatedly asked about that by members of this committee. Director Wray didn't tell us that there were 17 of those confidential human sources who entered restricted space, 4 went in the Capitol. None of them were arrested. They weren't authorized to do that. They broke the law. None of them were arrested. Lots of American citizens were arrested, but the guys whose whose American tax dollars was used to pay these guys who broke the law, none of them were. One was recommended for charging and was not charged. And remember when Chris Wray told us that the Richmond field office memorandum when pro-life Catholics was just a one-off, turns out he wasn't being square with dissent either. Director Wray wasn't square with us. He told us that multiple other officers were involved in targeting the Catholics. We got that information from Director Patel. We learned from Director Patel the FBI actually surveilled a priest, tried to get the priest to divulge information, break the priest-penitent relationship and confidence that exists. And Director Patel is saving taxpayers' money. He's not going to build a new headquarters outside of D.C. He's going to keep the headquarters right here in the capital city. Save Americans money, save the taxpayers money. In 8 months, Director Patel has given us the facts. He's ended the weaponization at the FBI. He's taken bad guys off the streets, and he's saving taxpayers money. But my guess is the Democrats won't focus on all that good news. They'll focus on politics. They'll stick with Comey and Clapper and Brennan and continue to try to undermine President Trump. That I yield to the ranking member for an opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Director Patel. You and I have not had the opportunity to meet, and alas, you failed to respond to the 8 oversight letters I've sent you over the last 7 months. So we do have a lot of questions piling up for you, but I want to start with a word of praise. The first FBI director was J. Edgar Hoover, who steadfastly refused to hire women, African Americans, and other minorities as agents. And although he was a closeted homosexual who lived in domestic partnership for decades with Clyde Tolson, he also participated in anti-gay crusades. He aggressively promoted what we would today call white Christian nationalism, and he would undoubtedly be turning over in his grave to see as one of his successors a first-generation Indian American and a proud Hindu. So I congratulate you on being a breakthrough in this sense and being a beneficiary of the civil rights movement that opened up the FBI and the federal workforce to lots of people who never would have been hired in its first decades. Alas, you share J. Edgar Hoover's dangerous obsession with blind loyalty over professionalism and effective public policy. For Hoover, it was blind loyalty to him in keeping his secrets. For you, it's blind loyalty to Donald Trump in keeping his secrets. During your confirmation, it was widely noted on all sides that your primary qualification...
Attention homeowners, I want to buy your house right now, as is, no matter what condition it's in.
...work experience at the FBI, but you had made over 1,000 media and political appearances in support of Trump's campaign. Your Senate confirmation vote was 51-49, the closest in history, with your opponents warning you were not qualified and had no interest in actually developing the qualifications for the job. I hoped that they were wrong. Alas, they were not. While most other new FBI directors drew on their experience as FBI agents, you didn't have that. But you did write a picture book trilogy for children ages 5 and up based on your experience clashing with President Trump's political enemies. In your book, you describe your literary alter ego, Kash the Knight, as a wacky, easily bored wizard carrying out King Donald's vengeance by driving his enemies out of the kingdom. In the books, King Donald is besieged by the evil Hillary Queen town, but saved in the end by Kash. Then Kash goes on to catch mules who are stealing the 2020 election for the great King Donald from Sleepy Joe. And then in the third book, Kash takes down the dragon of the jalapenos, nicknamed the DOJ. Your supporters had hoped that you would graduate from imagining yourself a romantic fairy tale knight to actually running America's premier federal law enforcement agency. Alas, just as we've learned how dangerous it is to put a science-denying anti-vaxxer in charge of our public health, we've learned how dangerous it is to name as director of the FBI a man who thinks of himself as a fairy tale knight who keeps a fire-breathing dragon named DOJ at home to forcibly drive villains out of the kingdom. When Charlie Kirk was assassinated, while his killer was still on the loose, you decided you didn't need to be at FBI headquarters in Washington to work with your team while the chaotic manhunt unfolded. You spent your evening dining in a swanky Midtown Manhattan restaurant and tweeting out false information that the subject of the shooting was in custody. a statement you had to retract 1 hour later. Your performance was so disturbing that even the MAGA base was alarmed. Culture warrior Christopher Rufo, who just a few months ago sat in your chair as a Republican witness, observed that you performed terribly, and he called for your ouster. The FBI might be able to survive your delusions of grandeur and the explosively volatile temper that was on display yesterday in the Senate. But the intractable problem is that you are running the FBI not as a law enforcement agency charged with keeping the American people safe, but as a political enforcement agency working directly for the president's vengeance campaign. 7 months in, it's impossible to overstate the destruction, chaos, and demoralization you've brought to the FBI and its workforce and the resulting danger your actions have caused to our country. You've been systematically purging the FBI of its most experienced and qualified agents, division leaders, and experts in counterterror, counterintelligence, and cybersecurity, precisely the people who have the expertise you lack and which the FBI and the country need. They've been expelled from the ranks of the Bureau simply because they did their duty investigating crimes, including those committed by the mob that attacked the Capitol on January 6, 2021, and beat the hell out of more than 140 police officers, or simply because you suspected them of being insufficiently loyal to Donald Trump. You illegally sacked Brian Driscoll, the former acting director of the Bureau and a decorated counterterrorism expert who worked at the FBI for nearly 20 years. According to Driscoll, you told him your own job, quote, depended on the removal of agents who worked on the cases against the president, regardless of whether the agents chose to work on those cases or not. You added, quote, the FBI tried to put the president in jail and he hasn't forgotten it. You forced out the leader of the Salt Lake City field office, Mehtab Saeed, just weeks before Charlie Kirk's assassination, depriving the FBI of an experienced counterterrorism expert described by her colleagues as absolutely the best and legendary. She would have led the FBI's manhunt had she not been fired. When Trump decided that rounding up immigrants with no criminal records was more important than preventing crimes like human trafficking of women and girls, drug dealing, terrorism, and fraud, you ordered the 25 largest field offices to divert thousands of agents away from chasing down violent criminals, sex traffickers, fraudsters, and scammers to carry out this immigration crackdown. Director Patel, you treated the men and women at FBI with disrespect and paranoia. You've assembled a roving band of freelancing henchmen within your office and charged them with conducting unauthorized investigations, targeting and harassing career FBI employees. Amazingly, you forced senior leadership to repeatedly take polygraph tests to prove their political loyalty and pushed out leaders who refused these demeaning exercises. And now we're seeing one very clear reason why you want to build a political FBI. The Epstein files. You want an FBI blindly loyal to Trump and to you as his enforcer so you can continue your cover-up of a massive international sex trafficking ring with more than 1,000 victims, betraying all of the survivors of the sexual violence. Before you got in this job, you called for full release of the Epstein files, telling podcaster Benny Johnson that the only reason the list was not released by DOJ and FBI was, quote, because of who's on that list. Upon your confirmation, you promised that, quote, there will be no cover-ups, no missing documents, no stone left unturned, and anyone from the prior or current Bureau who undermines this will be swiftly pursued. This spring, you ordered hundreds of agents to pore over all the Epstein files, but not to look for more clues about the money network or the network of human traffickers. You pulled these agents from their regular counterterrorism or drug trafficking duties to work around the clock, some of them sleeping at their desks, to conduct a frantic search to make sure Donald Trump's name and image were flagged and redacted wherever they appeared, whether an email, a text, a letter, an interview, a photograph, or a video. In May, Attorney General Bondi reportedly told Trump that his name had indeed appeared multiple times throughout the Epstein files. And not long thereafter, in July, you and the Attorney General released a memo claiming that, quote, no further disclosure would be appropriate or warranted. In a few short months, how did you go from being a crusader for accountability and transparency for the Epstein files to being a part of the conspiracy and cover-up? The answer is simple. You said it yourself, because of who's on that list. Donald Trump's relationship with Epstein over the years is well documented. A week ago, the Oversight Committee released Trump's disturbing birthday book, Note to Epstein, written over a drawing of a woman's naked body, referring to a, quote, wonderful secret. The Oversight Committee obtained the note from the Epstein estate, not from the FBI, raising questions again of whether the FBI has been withholding documents. While you're unleashing the FBI to cater to Trump's desire to shut down the Epstein inquiry, the first 9 months of the Trump presidency have seen a spate of political violence and domestic terror events. We saw deadly attacks on political figures on both the left and the right. The brutal assassination of Minnesota Democratic House Speaker Melissa Hortman and her husband, and the attempted murder of Democratic State Senator John Hoffman and his wife, who miraculously survived a combined 17 gunshots. We saw an arsonist set Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro's residence on fire. And of course, last week, we saw the horrific, cold-blooded assassination of Charlie Kirk in Utah that has shaken the nation. 1 minute after Charlie Kirk was shot in the neck, a 16-year-old shooter in Evergreen, Colorado, radicalized by white supremacist ideology online, opened fire and critically wounded 2 other students at Evergreen High School. We've seen lethal anti-Semitic violence, including the murder of 2 young Israeli embassy staffers just blocks from the Capitol, and then in the attack on a gathering of Jewish people in support of hostages held in Gaza in Boulder in June. We've seen continued mass shootings at schools, like the domestic terror incident at a Catholic school.
Make your browser fast. Make your browser safe. Make your browser Chrome. Choose Google Chrome for your computer.
And Charlie Kirk should be able to participate in politics as elected officials or active citizens without being shot down in cold blood in the United States of America. People should also be able to go to elementary school, to middle school, to high school, to work, to the mall, and to church without being shot down in explosions of gun violence. The important position at the FBI requires a leader who puts public safety and national security and the rule of law first. I'm afraid, Director Patel, you've given us reason to believe you've used the powers of the FBI to serve Donald Trump and his agenda of partisan retribution. You've broken your promise not to do that. You've betrayed Jeffrey Epstein's victims and survivors. You've turned your back on the career law enforcement officers of the FBI, and as a result, you've left all of us less safe than before. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. That opening statement may have been longer than any book director's ever written or anyone else has written. Without objection, all of the opening statements will be included in the record. We will now introduce today's witness. Mr. Patel has been the director of the FBI since February of 2025. He previously served as chief of staff at the Department of Defense, deputy director of national intelligence with the National Security Council, and also as a congressional staffer, as a federal prosecutor, where he focused on national security cases, and he also worked as a public defender in the state of Florida. We welcome our witness, appreciate his work, and thank him for appearing here today. We will begin by swearing you in. Director, would you please stand, raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief, so help you God? Let the record reflect that the witness has answered in the affirmative. You can be seated as you are. You know, you've been through this yesterday. Did a fine job. Please know that your written testimony will be entered into the record in its entirety. Accordingly, we ask that you summarize your testimony. Director, you may begin.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Raskin, and members of the committee. I want to begin today by discussing the appalling assassination of Charlie Kirk. It's important for this FBI to be transparent without jeopardizing our investigations, so a little bit of the timeline is important. Charlie Kirk was unfortunately assassinated on September 10th. We immediately, the next day, released images early in the day in local time in Utah to start the public partnership in our manhunt for the assassin and culprits. At approximately 5 p.m. local time, I arrived on the ground and walked the crime scene myself, and we flew multiple FBI assets in and out to process DNA simultaneously while bringing in evidence response technicians, hostage rescue teams, and other experts to assist state and local law enforcement with their investigation. At 8 p.m. local on September 11th, the FBI collected and populated and promulgated at a press conference a video of the suspect on the grounds. We also released enhanced images. Due to that release that I directed and ordered, the suspect involved was apprehended and in custody at 10 p.m. local time. That's less than 2 hours after we did the video release and the photo release. So within 33 hours, that individual suspect was in custody. And his family, who has since been interrogated, specifically stated to FBI interrogators that because of the video that the FBI released at my direction and because of the photographs that they released, they identified their son, they confronted their son when he swung by their home, and that's what led to his apprehension. We are still, the FBI has that investigation ongoing, and it continues to be ongoing, and I want to thank the state of Utah and the state and local authorities there. And I also want to thank the Attorney General and President Trump for directing resources to allow us to conduct that investigation as we have. Under this administration, the FBI has arrested more than 23,000 violent criminals. 23,000 in 7 months. That's twice as many year to date last year. We've taken over 6,000 firearms off the streets. 6,000 guns are no longer in the hands of criminals in 7 months. We've identified and found and located 4,700 child victims. That is a 35% increase year to date last year. We have arrested 1,500 child predators. That is a 10% increase year to date last year in just 7 months. We've assisted our partners with countless counterterrorism operations around the world. We've captured, at the FBI, 4 of the most top 10 wanted fugitives in the world in 7 months. To put that in perspective, that's as many as my predecessor nabbed in the entirety of the Biden administration. We got 4, we got more coming. On top of that, in 2 weeks, thanks to the help of the CIA, we collected and captured one of the individuals responsible for the horrific Abbey Gate bombing that led to the murder of 13 service members. We did that in 2 weeks. They didn't do it in the 4 years of the entire prior administration. Nationwide, we've been executing our Operation Summer Heat, the FBI's national focus on targeting violent crime based on intelligence-driven operations. Ask the citizens of Seattle, Miami, Memphis, Charlotte, Chicago, New Orleans, to specifically highlight New Orleans and Nashville. There has been a 250% increase in violent crime arrests in those cities alone and other mid-major cities that I've just listed. In just a few short months, we have already unleashed 1,000 FBI personnel across this country. Every single state across this country is getting a plus up. This is a fiction that the FBI is short or that we are compromising the men and women in the field. They do not need to be in Washington, D.C., so we're sending them into the field to each and every one of your states. Because of that, crime is at an all-time low. We had to do it because of the explosion of crime. And maybe the most important stat for Americans to realize, in just 7 months, we are on track to produce the lowest murder rate in modern U.S. history by double digits. Those are results not of mine. Those are results of the men and women of the FBI. If you want to criticize me, bring it on, but do not attack the brave leaders in the field. We are also working 24/7, 365 on the opioid epidemic that is killing more than hundreds of thousands of people a year. We have seized 1,600 kilograms of fentanyl off the streets so far in 7 months. Year to date, 25% increase. To put that in perspective, that's enough to kill a third of the American population, 120 million Americans. 100,000 kilograms of cocaine and meth gone off the streets. Earlier this year, I highlighted in Cincinnati, Ohio, how we're getting creative to chase down those that were willing to do harm to our citizens. Not just by striking at the heart of the fentanyl producers, but the fentanyl precursor companies in China. And we indicted for the first time multiple companies and individuals, not just in America, but in mainland China, that are producing the ingredients that produce and make fentanyl that kill our children. And we're going to keep going. Counterterrorism work, cyber attacks, and foreign adversaries are something the FBI must never sleep on, and we are not sleeping. In the counterintelligence space alone, this year, year to date, 30% increase in counterintelligence arrests from the DPRK, Russia, Iran, and China. And I want the American people to know, in this setting, there's a lot of work that the brave men and women in the FBI are doing we just can't get into, but they don't stop. Our cyber threats, ransomware attacks, those harming our children online. We have nearly a 20% increase in indictments and arrests in 7 months alone this year. We're going after those that harm our malware, infrastructure systems, telecom systems, and energy structure. Combating SALT and Vault typhoons are just a little bit of the examples we're doing. Maybe most importantly, under the counterterrorism and domestic terrorism umbrella, our nihilist, violent extremists. and those that label themselves 764, who wish to go online and convince children to maim and mutilate themselves and commit suicide. And we are producing record numbers of arrests under that umbrella organization. We even stopped an individual in the 764 network who wanted to conspire to kill an adolescent girl. He is now in custody. Transparency remains one of my main priorities at the FBI. And this is what I've done in my 7 months at the helm. We've produced more than 33,000 pages of documents to Congress to a variety of committees, including, I believe, 7,500 to this committee alone, if memory serves me correct. To put the 33,000 in perspective, my predecessor in 7 years produced oversight, and I promise you I will continue to do so. On the Epstein case,